Yeah, so thanks for everyone for joining us at the President's Conference today. Charlotte's going to talk about, you come from an HR perspective, so diversifying your talent pipeline. I know things in HR have been very up and down throughout the course of the last 14 months, and a lot of presidents are in a position of hiring. You know, they have to kind of make these decisions and choices, and they might not have an HR representative or person that assists them with that. So definitely very important. Hiring can be one of the most expensive mistakes that an organization can make. So I'm sure your presentation is going to be very valuable. So Charlotte began her career in talent research and sourcing on the agency side for an executive search firm, and made the leap into the tech and startup world when she joined OpenCare as their first talent sourcer. I didn't know that. That's a big company now. Good for you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that's where Charlotte built the infrastructure for strategic talent sourcing from the ground up. She then tackled full cycle recruitment and managing a team as a talent lead, solving business problems across the entire organization, and continued to build out talent sourcing as a data-driven and strategic function. So today you're part of driving pipeline sourcing strategies, market intelligence globally across technical and corporate teams at Thomson Reuters. So awesome resume, and thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to listen in on your presentation as well. So I'll let you get started. I'm sure people will start trickling in, and good luck. And I'll be back towards the end to wrap things up. So thanks again for being here.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for the intro, and thank you for having me. Awesome. So I'll get started, and yeah, hopefully more people trickle in as we go through. But again, I really appreciate the introduction, and want to get stuck in. So again, just to introduce myself, my name is Charlotte, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a talent sourcing specialist at Thomson Reuters. So I've basically dedicated my entire career to helping organizations solve problems through hiring exceptional talent. I've recruited everything from software engineers to corporate roles, even one time headhunted a head of brewing for a beer company. So I've seen a lot of it. I've done talent in many different ways. I've done it both in a full cycle capacity, which is more like traditional recruiting, where you're taking your candidates all the way from the beginning of the search to close, and more recently actually in a sourcing capacity, where we're just focusing on specializing in getting candidates and talent into your interview process, whether they're looking for a new role or not. I've done this as an individual contributor. I've done it as a people leader on the agency side, and then, as mentioned, in a startup environment in tech. And today, I'm a part of the global sourcing team at Thomson Reuters. So what I specialize in there is building out talent sourcing strategies at scale, market intelligence, and then driving pipeline across the entire business. So both in the technical and corporate parts of the business. I see lots of people are joining now. This is great. Welcome, everybody. In my experience, I have learned and seen quite a bit. And so I'm really excited to share with you today something that is very important to me. I want to talk about how to build scalable and inclusive growth engines in talent. So let's get stuck in. The first thing that I want to talk about is the concept of the unicorn, right? I'm sure a lot of people in this session today have heard of this, or perhaps have even hunted for unicorns, right? Maybe you're more familiar with the purple squirrel. But these are candidates that have super niche capabilities, hard to find mixes of experience. And I've been seeing more and more demand for these folks. And the irony is that the elusive unicorn is becoming so common and in demand. Unicorns definitely exist in talent. They definitely have, there's definitely roles that require really niche skills and experience. But it seems more and more that hiring managers are convinced that their role definitely needs one, and that the role of the talent team is there to hunt for them until they're found. And so the good thing that I see is that hiring managers are starting to think more deeply about their roles, right? And the needs of the team. But the problem is when we start to overcomplicate the skills and experience that people think are necessary for a role, we start to blur the lines between must-haves and nice-to-haves. What we're really doing is we're creating artificial constraints on our addressable talent market, which is already really competitive. And this affects our ability to hire effectively in a way that doesn't disproportionately exclude underrepresented groups. So today, I want to talk about why and how this has become a problem. And most importantly, I want to give you actionable changes that you can make today as executive leaders in your respective businesses to help your business grow through sustainable and inclusive talent acquisition strategy. So let's get stuck in. Now, how do you know if you even have a unicorn problem? There are many symptoms for this problem. I'm going to list a few to maybe help you identify it. Number one, your job descriptions might contain laundry lists of requirements, right? Like 10 plus requirements for an entry-level job, for example. You might have legacy job descriptions and requirements, right? Job descriptions that, especially for roles that are commonly filled over and over, have been passed down from years and years, and nobody knows who wrote it anymore or what context they wrote it in, right? Your requirements for the role are what they are just because, well, that's how it's always been, or maybe that's how it's always worked for this team or for this business. You might have blurred lines between nice to haves and must haves. And this is an interesting one because in your job posting, you might be distinguishing very clearly what is a must have and what is a nice to have. But then when you're evaluating candidates, all of a sudden you start to heavily favor those nice to haves. And sometimes it gets to the point where those nice to haves secretly actually become the must haves, right? Maybe some of you have seen this happen. Scope creep is another pretty big symptom, right? So the list of requirements starts to get longer and longer after you've actually launched the search and even gotten into interviews. So, you know, it's like, okay, oh, we found this person had this skill that we didn't consider before, let's add that to the list. And all of a sudden the list gets longer and you're in the middle of your search. Hiring managers who have a sole responsibility for making decisions around the necessary requirements for a role. And they do so in a silo, right? So they're basing the requirements of the role off of their own personal experiences and not necessarily partnering with talent to make an informed decision around what is happening in the talent market and if what you think you want is even achievable. And then you might also see an inability to make hiring decisions, right? This has happened so many times that I've seen, maybe it's happened to you as well, where, oh, we find the perfect candidate. Now let's just get one or two more in just so we can be sure we want to compare, right? So I hear this all the time. We want top talent. We want the best for this role, but have you earned it? And it's a question we don't ask ourselves very often, right? Everybody wants the best for their team. Everybody wants to hire top talent, but it's a candidates market. That's the reality. And it actually has been for some time. And so posting a role and waiting for the best talent to come to you doesn't really cut it anymore. It's an extremely competitive market, especially in Toronto. We have major competitors moving in recent years, particularly in the tech space. And so there's a massive imbalance between supply and demand, and it favors candidates. So they have options a lot of the time, and a lot of the time, they don't really even need to send in an application to get a job. They're being headhunted. So, of course, in 2020, right, we had a dip with hiring freezes and layoffs across the board. Certain industries, however, are thriving in this remote world. And many industries are now bouncing back. And guess what? They're all hiring, and they're not just hiring for their needs for 2021, they are also hiring for the backlog of what they did not hire in 2020. So all of that is to say the market is insane and you need to sharpen your competitive edge. So what does any of this have to do with unicorns? I want to talk about the concept of an addressable market in talent. So this addressable market represents all of the candidates, employed or not, that could potentially be placed in the role that you have at hand. So as we start to create requirements for the role, naturally we start narrowing down the pool of folks that we can select from. So let's take a sales rep, for example, right? Maybe we need talent in Toronto. Okay, so that narrows the pool a little bit. And then maybe we want B2B sales experience. That's going to be pretty important. They also need to have experience selling at the enterprise level because it's an enterprise product. Oh, but we also want them to have experience selling into SMB because we have SMB products and maybe in the future they're going to switch. So we want some flexibility. Also having a short sales cycle of 1 to 3 months. Yeah, that's going to be really important. We want them to be able to hit the ground running. Oh, and they need to be cool with a 20-80 split on base to commission in their comp package. So you can see how these restraints can really shrink our pool. And this is an important process to go through. I want to make that clear. It's really important to objectively focus your search for talent, but the key is to strike a balance and a reasonable balance between what you want and what you can realistically achieve. And that's kind of where the science and the magic lies. And when we take a look at these constraints, these are just the constraints that you're placing on yourself and your own search. What about the ones that you don't have control over necessarily, like the state of the market or rising compensation expectations, or candidates where, the timing just isn't really right or they've got other options, and you might not actually be their top choice. And guess what? On top of that, your competition probably thinks they need something similar to what you do. And so you end up fighting over the same tiny pool of talent over and over and over again. That pool, it gets so narrow. This is not scalable. It's not sustainable. And you need to have flexibility in your expectations, and you need to listen to the market in order to compete. That's the reality of the environment today. You just can't afford to not. So you might actually be able to get that unicorn hire if you persist, but it could take a really long time, or you might not end up getting the exact quality that you're looking for, or you might end up actually paying a lot more than you had initially anticipated for that talent. And you have to ask yourself, are these bets that you want to place against your business, right? Are these things that you kind of want to take a chance on? I wouldn't. So there's a lot of power in making informed trade-offs when it comes to hiring. And there's even more power in making those trade-offs proactively, or at least coming up with decision trees for those trade-offs ahead of time. You're going to save a ton of time. You're going to save a ton of money in your hiring process doing that. And you'll subsequently be able to keep up in an extremely competitive market. So all of this, what does that have to do with diversity and inclusion? Well, so you remember how we were talking about those constraints on our addressable market, the ones that we cannot control. One of those constraints is how our job postings and even our interview processes are perceived and experienced by candidates. So when hiring managers and teams rely solely on their own experiences or what's always been done to inform what experience is necessary for someone to be successful in a role, we're openly inviting bias into our evaluation of candidates and the way that we talk about our roles. And so those laundry lists of requirements that we see on job descriptions and that we're putting out there, and all of those judgments that we're placing on how someone should have arrived at that particular skill set that you're looking for are disproportionately harmful to underrepresented groups. So to illustrate this, I'm going to tell you an actual story of something that happened to me at my previous company, the tech startup I was at. So we were looking to hire a software developer, and with the absolute best intentions, we put up a job description. And this line right here was at the very top of the requirements list. So you have to have a very strong understanding of computer science, preferably through a university degree. We thought it was hard. Something really special happened. It doesn't happen often, but I got an email from a candidate providing feedback about the posting. And this candidate reached out to me, and the first thing that I did was I took a look at her profile and her resume because we had her in the system. When I tell you she was perfect for the role, she was bang on. As far as her skills and experience went, she was what we were looking for in this role. The only difference was she actually didn't have a university degree. I think she went through a boot camp, which was like a one-year program. So that's pretty impressive, right? She got to that same place in a software engineering role, didn't even have a degree. And this is what she said to me in the email regarding the posting. She said, the inclusion of that preference indicates to me that the engineering team has a bias against non-computer science graduates. I don't have a computer science degree, so I don't think that this would be the best fit for me. Even if I that of joining the team, the desire to include that in the job posting makes me think that bias runs pretty deep, and that's my skills would still be viewed as lesser. As a woman in engineering, I worry enough about that already. So that's some pretty powerful stuff, right? And my immediate thought when I read that was, oh my God, how many candidates have looked at our job posting already and self-selected out because they felt alienated by the language, and they didn't tell us, they didn't send the email. Probably more than one, right? So this is one of those things we can't afford. And more importantly, somebody should never feel alienated by reading a job posting in the first place, right? So it completely changed the way we wrote job descriptions. And we've all seen this statistic, right? Men apply for jobs when they meet 60% of the qualifications. Women apply only if they meet 100% of them, right? We've all seen this. But do you guys know why this happens? So it's interesting. Harvard ran a study, and they were looking at the reasons why men and women choose to not apply to roles. It turns out that women are actually twice as likely than men to pull out of a process or not apply because they didn't meet all of the qualifications on the list. So they want to follow the guidelines, and they don't want to waste anybody's time. They also were less likely than men to not apply because they didn't think they could do the job. So what this means is that for women in these situations, it's not actually about a lack of confidence in their skills. It's about a lack of clarity in what the role really requires. So essentially, women are more likely than men to read the job description in full and take it to heart. So interesting example of how underrepresented groups are disproportionately affected by the language that we use when we're talking about our roles. And hiring managers are innocently putting out these laundry lists of expectations, knowing, right, that they're not realistically going to find somebody who's checking all the boxes. But that's not the important part. The important part is that they're assuming that everybody reading that job description is going to know that and apply anyway. And so they'll wait for somebody with almost all of the qualifications to fall in their lap, and they'll make the hire. And then we scratch our heads about why we can't seem to hire women at the same rate that we do men, because we don't have enough applicants. So these seem like really minor details, but their impact is actually really big. And the companies that have a pulse on this kind of stuff are the ones that are hiring top talent, because they're really tuned into this, and they have created a competitive edge through intelligent talent acquisition. So I've spent a lot of time talking about the problem. I want to introduce you to some solutions. And so I'm going to give you 3 things that you can action today as executive leaders in your organizations. The first thing that I want to talk about is enabling your talent team to be a strategic business partner. This is the single most important thing that you can do as an executive leader for your company. Creating a culture of respect for talent acquisition within the organization as a strategic business builder, as opposed to maybe just a service that puts butts in seats, right? And that buy-in starts from the top. That starts with you. And some examples of what that can look like are investing into talent sourcing, right? So investing into folks that specialize in talent sourcing and market intelligence. So they're just focused on how do we get candidates into the process, to help your hiring managers make informed decisions about their hiring processes and who they choose to hire. And then also holding hiring managers accountable to make those informed decisions and to adhere to a objective and standardized hiring process. And then in addition to that, you want to enable your talent acquisition team to hold them accountable as well, because you're not going to be there to handhold the process the whole time, right? Second, I would encourage you to move towards objectivity in your talent processes. So empower your talent team and your hiring managers to assess the hiring process for objectivity. So this can look like, starting the role definition for your hiring needs with the business problem that you're looking to solve, and focusing on the core skills necessary to solve that problem, instead of starting with the title of the role or what experience you think somebody should have. And then most importantly, keeping those expectations consistent and clearly outlined throughout the evaluation process. So we're always coming back to those core skills, and any sort of commentary or evaluation of something outside of those agreed upon skills isn't important. And I would also encourage you to push the organization to redefine what fit means at your company, right? This is especially important when it comes to culture. What are your core values? What questions can you ask a candidate to give them the opportunity to demonstrate that they embody that value, right? Culture isn't about, does this team want to go and have a beer with this candidate? It's about making sure that folks are aligned on these universal values that you have as an organization. And then I would also recommend that you push yourself and hiring managers to shorten the laundry list of expectations that they have for a role, and to think critically about and accurately advertise only the essential expectations for a role in job postings. So that can look like challenging your teams to not use language like nice to have or bonus points in your job postings. Routinely asking hiring managers, stack rank your skills and requirements, right, by importance. If you could only have 1, 2, 3 of these, which would you choose? This image to the right is Gabrielle Chanel. She's a fashion icon. She founded Coco Chanel, and she once famously said, before you leave the house, look in the mirror and remove 1 accessory. She was talking about getting dressed in the morning, but I think we could think the same way about how we write job descriptions. So something that I want to especially highlight around objectivity is thinking about the role requirements and candidate evaluation. Is you want to focus on the core skills and move away from judgments and preference of how someone should have arrived at that skill. So if we go back to the example that I gave you about that engineering candidate that reached out and actually self-selected out because of the university degree requirement, what we should have done in that situation when we were writing the job description is to ask ourselves why that university degree was so important. Like, what skills does somebody gain at school? Is it a strong technical capability that we're looking for? Is it great communication skills? Do we like university grads because they have autonomy? So by putting down the degree requirement, instead of just calling out those skills, we were making the assumption that going to university is the only way that somebody could attain these skills. And in that same motion, we are discounting and alienating an entire pool of talent that could have arrived at those skills just in a different way and be completely qualified for the role. So education is a privilege, right? It's not something that everybody has access to. And further, that inaccessibility of education disproportionately affects marginalized groups. So for me, for example, I have a university degree because I was lucky enough to have parents who could afford to send me to school. And because I had the time to focus on it, I didn't have to worry about any other priorities in my life outside of myself. And so I was in that position to be able to do that. There's a ton of value in the candidate that has gotten to a similar position in their career as me without that head start, right? So by consciously making that change, what we're doing is we're opening up the pool of talent that we can choose from to include people who might not have gone to school. And what we're doing is we're creating diversity of thought in our organization. So just like there's more than one solution to a problem, there's more than one set of experiences that can set somebody up for success in a role. And businesses that are more diverse in thought and talent are higher performing, period. It's a fact. So by creating a larger talent pool to choose from, you'll be hiring a lot more quickly, a lot more effectively, and you're going to be doing it while your competition are still fighting over the same old tiny pool of talent that they always do, right? So this is an intelligent talent acquisition approach. And my final recommendation for today is to center hiring decisions around specific strengths and risks that each candidate presents, and think about how that fits into the overall strengths and risks of the team that you're hiring for. So every candidate that you hire for is going to have risks. So by employing objective processes, you can easily and fairly identify those risks. And then making a hiring decision doesn't necessarily become about choosing the person who checks the most boxes of what you're looking for. It becomes about evaluating which risks you're realistically on in the current context of the team. So what you're doing is you're making informed decisions about trade-offs for the sake of growing your team and your business. And the role of talent in this process is to bring the data and the options to hiring managers to help them make that decision. And then ultimately, the hiring managers are being held accountable to making that final call to effectively grow their team. And so, for example, if we go back to my example of the sales reps, right? We might think we absolutely need a rep with enterprise experience, great. But we also only have a budget for a pretty low base and a high commission structure. So let's say in this scenario, you've enabled your talent team to be a business advisor. That's great. They inform the hiring manager, hey, based on our conversations with candidates and market data, we're not able to attract enterprise reps with the current compensation plan. However, reps that are selling into small to medium-sized businesses instead of enterprise are a lot more flexible on that base, right? And let's say you've been at the search for months and we can't make the hire because we're really rigid in our expectations, and now all of a sudden we're missing our revenue targets. So now it's like really affecting the business. So when we start to talk about trade-offs, typically what we're looking at is three things: speed, quality, and cost. And in a lot of cases, we can pick two or three. Okay, so let's use this structure for thinking about hiring decisions. So in this scenario, our first option is prioritizing quality and cost, right? So we're sticking with that profile. It's essential that these folks are selling at the enterprise level. We don't have the budget for higher base, but we're willing to accept the revenue impact from continuing this search to look for the perfect person. And the business can react accordingly and we can adjust. Your second option is to speak with finance, find room in the budget for a higher base so that we can prioritize both that skill and hire somebody quickly. So then we're reducing the impact on revenue targets, right? Maybe the extra cost on that base is less than the opportunity cost of not having somebody in that position. And so it makes sense for your business. It's about context. Your third option is to open yourself up to folks that only have SMB experience, right? So we can close the role both on time and on budget. And then the trade-off is that we're investing into the growth and development of that candidate. So let's consider maybe there's additional context, right? Turns out that the sales manager for this team actually has several years of coaching experience with reps and recently promoted one of their reps to a team lead. So they actually have more capacity today or to spend time developing somebody. So within the context of the greater team, this might actually be the most viable option. So to conclude, like there isn't judgment on which option is universally correct. It's about understanding the business context and the trade-offs and making the best call in that particular situation. So as executive leaders, by enabling your talent team to consistently ask the business these questions and ask them to make these decisions, by empowering them to hold hiring managers accountable and think critically and creatively about who can satisfy the needs of the position, you're greatly sharpening your competitive edge in what is a very, very tight market. And you'll allow yourself to get ahead in growing an organization that is rich in diversity of both thought and experience. And yeah, that's everything I wanted to talk about today. So wanted to say thank you so much for your time. I don't know if we have time for questions. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Charlotte Harris there. I work for Thomson Reuters. And one more thing, just a quick plug while I have the stage. I wanted to talk about my boss, Mike Betley. He is the person that I have learned everything from. Like 99% of the stuff that I'm talking to you about today comes from him and what I've learned from him. So I'm still ramping up in my new role. I'm not available for consulting, but he is. So if you ever have any interest in consulting help for talent acquisition strategy, he is the best in the business. So I just wanted to shout him out. He's going to be embarrassed that I did that because he didn't ask me to do it, but I'm doing it. Awesome. That's everything. Do we have time for questions? Rachel?
Hey, Charlotte. Thanks so much for that. That was extremely informative. Our panel started about a minute ago on our main stage. But if anyone has any questions, can they maybe reach out to you directly? Is that okay?
Yeah, me on LinkedIn. Again, I'm Charlotte Harris on there. Just Google Charlotte Harris Thomson Reuters. I should come up in Toronto.
Awesome. That's amazing. And if you want to put it in the chat there too, if people can find it faster, that would be amazing. But thank you for your time. I know it takes a long time to prepare and get ready for this kind of thing. And we had quite a number of people on throughout the duration. So I really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for being here. And I hopefully will see you again.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to. And thanks for having me. And
thank you very much. So our panel has started now on the stage, main stage. We've got 3 amazing presidents that are going to be speaking about all things entrepreneurship, strategy, the pandemic, and how it's affected their organizations. So head on over to our main stage. And again, thank you, Charlotte, for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.